few realize the financial pitfall that they're in or that this will even be a problem. And so this ends up being a classic problem of you should have read the fine text. Though also, pro tip, when buying a home, read literally every detail and know the HOA's rules inside and out before you buy. Then even in these situations, if a homeowner realizes there might be a problem, what can they do? Well, unfortunately, not much. Generally speaking, you can demand for the financial reports from the association to see how the money is being spent, and then you could try to get the homeowners association board to raise fees to cover the costs if it's clear that there's not enough money in the bank for maintenance. So that obviously sucks for you because now you're paying more than you thought you'd have to. And even that is assuming the board didn't just ignore your request to look at statements. And in cases like that, or if there's clearly financial wrongdoing, residents will likely need to go to court. And from there, a bunch can happen. I mean, up to and including the board and HOA being dissolved entirely, albeit that being rare. But even there, that doesn't solve the problem, right? I mean, we saw the situation in Texas where the city wasn't just going to pick up the tab for the roads. And a lot of the financial ignorance that can happen in even otherwise well-run HOAs that have sensible rules and enforcement that help homeowners maximize value. Which is why Erfurt, who's generally pro-HOA, wants cities to pick up the tab. Although to be fair to him, he thinks the issue stems from before the HOA is even made. This is all a cascading problem stemming from cities making agreements with developers to shift the responsibility of running parts of the city to local homeowners. And in return, they get to have a larger tax base without the responsibility that normally comes with them. Though at the same time, you could also argue this the other way around, with people saying the developers actually trick cities with promises that they knew wouldn't realistically be honored. Which is why with this, I'll ask you what you think. And I don't mean about HOAs in general, though feel free to share. I love a horror story or three. But specifically, who do you think should ultimately be on the hook for things like these roads when things go belly up? And then, if you're not super involved in the gaming world, you might not have heard about the unmitigated catastrophe that is Concord.
This game is almost definitely the biggest flop in gaming history.
So Concord's an online team-based first-person shooter developed by Firewalk Studios, which was acquired by Sony last year. And the game actually launched on August 23rd, but like pretty much every side project I ever announced, they then promptly unlaunched it, with Sony announcing that the game will be taken completely offline this Friday, September 6th, and explaining, while many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognize that other aspects of the game in our initial launch didn't land the way we'd intended. While we determine the best path ahead, Concord sales will cease immediately, and we will begin to offer a full refund for all gamers who have purchased the game for PS5 or PC. Also, to explain, when they say that it didn't land the way they intended, they mean that the game sold just 25,000 copies across both platforms. Right, in financial terms, that means about $1 million in revenue. And Steam charts show that the game peaked at just under 700 concurrent players just after launch. Which, in case you don't understand just how horrible that is. One, even Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which was also a notorious flop, still managed to get 13,000 concurrent players. Two, the under 700 number we're talking about were peak numbers. Like if you look right now, they only have 40 or 50 people concurrently playing Concord. And three, a AAA title as ambitious as Concord should have reached a player count in the hundreds of thousands, if not past a million. Right, not only did this game cost likely tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to make, it took 6 to 8 years. It was a brand new IP that was supposed to grow into a staple franchise with its own ever-expanding universe and cast of characters. I mean, just a week before launch, you had the game director hyping up major content drops planned for October and January. I mean, Concord was even supposed to get its own episode on Amazon's upcoming anthology series called Secret Level, where each entry is based on a different video game IP. So also there, it's unclear if they're gonna scrap that episode before its December release date, because now it's based on a game that practically doesn't exist. And so, obviously with this, the flop came as a shock to the game developers, but even people who expected this game to flop didn't realize it would flop this hard.
I am beyond surprised because I thought they'd at least ride this as much as they could, like trying to update the game, like desperately trying to get some players to buy into it. Like I thought this would go at least 6 months, like a full season or something of the game, but it didn't even make it like a full 2 weeks.
I've never seen a live service, AAA live service, published by such a high-profile publisher die this fast.
Right, and so all of this, it raises the question of, well, what the fuck happened? Right, because if you looked at just the critics' reviews, you wouldn't have expected it to perform so poorly. I mean, they weren't great, they weren't even good, but they weren't completely awful. On Metacritic, it had a 62 out of 100, with a general consensus being that although the gameplay was fine, it just didn't bring anything new or interesting to the table that you couldn't already find in Overwatch, Valorant, or Destiny 2, with some saying IGN maybe put it best.
Grab a copy of Overwatch off some dusty GameStop shelf and rub it under the musky armpit of the Guardians of the Galaxy's Peter Quill, and you might have something close to the feeling of Concord.
But then, if you look at the user ratings, the game score plummets to an embarrassing 1.8 out of 10, with some just absolutely shitting all over Concord's petrified face.
Because it was a $40 game that was a watered-down, worse version of all of its free counterparts that it was trying to suckle from the teats of.
It was a generic slop hero shooter with character design that probably rivaled that of my actual doodles in kindergarten.
But no, also with this, if you venture over into the more political side of reactions, you have some people claiming Concord was an example of go woke, go broke, with a number of people pointing to the game's inclusion of pronouns and multicultural characters. But really, most people seem to agree that it was just the wrong game at the wrong time with mediocre content.
Like, you can't look at a game like Deadlock that has tons of representation, and you can't look at a game like Overwatch that's somehow more woke than Concord ever could hope to be, and then be like, the reason why Concord failed is because it was woke.
But, with all that said, really the only question left is, will Sony try to salvage this game at all, or are they going to just try to move on and forget about this? Because some have taken the company's promise to, quote, explore options, including those that will better reach our players, as maybe a hint that it could make Concord free to play. And there you even have outlets like Forbes saying Sony should do that even without a monetization plan in place, writing, no, the game is not remotely designed for a flip to free to play, given that the whole point was a bunch of free earned stuff in exchange for the $40 price point. But right now, that doesn't matter. It needs players fast. Though this, standing in the face of others that think there's no way to salvage this.
Free to play will not save the game. People just don't want anything that the game has to offer. The game doesn't really look like it plays well. The characters look stupid. I think high triple-digit amount of people are going to be absolutely removed because of this.
But for now, we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. And so if you're of the few several thousand that got the game, I'd love to know your thoughts. But also, I'd love to hear from you if you avoided this game. What was the reason why? I'd love to hear from you, because this game wasn't even remotely on my radar. And then, y'all, it is finally football season, which also means for me, it is fantasy football season. And I wanted to remind you that there's always action on today's sponsor, Prize Picks, the fantasy sports app that allows you to run your game all season long. Because Prize Picks is the skill-based fantasy game where it's just you against the numbers. And if you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. And one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on Prize Picks every week in September. Yes, really, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. So definitely don't miss that deal before it's gone when September ends. And it's easy. You just pick, submit, you're done in less than 60 seconds. And so for me, personally, this week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at football. I'm selecting Justin Herbert for more than 0.5 rushing and reception touchdowns, and Garrett Wilson for more than 68.5 receiving yards. So I will say the Herbert choice may be more of a hopeful choice rather than a thought out one. But the main thing is, y'all, Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So click the link in the description, download the app today, and use code DeFranco to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup when using code DeFranco. And then, in interesting entertainment news, I found myself agreeing with Jenna Ortega today, right? Because she's been popping up in headlines because she's doing tons of interviews for the new Beetlejuice film. And yesterday, she was asked what she would do if she was approached to do an Edward Scissorhands reboot as Edith Scissorhands, right? Essentially a female-led version of the movie, or a reboot a la the woman-led Ghostbusters or Ocean's 8. And to that question, you had Jenna say it.
No, you know what I would say about that specifically as well? I love that there's a lot more female leads nowadays. I think that's so special, but we should have our own. I don't like it when it's like a spin-off. Like, I don't want to see like Jamie Bond, I want to see just like another badass.
And with that, well, I'm not gonna go out of my way to hate on a gender bender reboot. I 100% agree. Give me more Carey Mulligan in Promising Young Woman. Give me Sigourney Weaver in Alien. Give me Uma Thurman in Kill Bill. Give me Samara Weaving in Ready or Not. Also, yes, right in this moment, I'm realizing I have an affinity for violent wronged women. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not completely against the idea of reimagining a character as a different gender. I think Starbuck is a fantastic example of that. But main thing, yeah, Ortega's words here, it resulted in a lot of headlines, and it comes as roles for women in Hollywood have been a hot topic. Right? There's always the conversation happening of representation and diversity. What's the industry doing? And you see that there's tons of initiatives to make strides there, but also a report from August highlighted just how little the needle has actually moved there. Right? Because even last year, which was the year of Barbie, women on screen saw some setbacks. With, for example, USC Annenberg's Inclusion Initiative finding that of the 100 top grossing films of 2023, only 30% had women in leading roles, which is a 14% drop from 2022. Also, on top of that, only 32% of speaking characters in movies last year were girls or women, and only 11% were gender balanced, meaning that there was a roughly even split of speaking roles between men and women. So with that, you had the author of the report, Professor Stacey L. Smith, saying in a statement, no matter how you examine the data, 2023 was not the year of the woman. we continue to report the same trends for girls and women on screen, year in and year out. It is clear there is either a dismissal of women as an audience for more than 1 or 2 films per year, a refusal to find ways to create meaningful change, or both. And saying if the industry wants to survive its current moment, it must examine its failure to employ half the population on screen. With a different report also finding a similar pattern in television as well, with one of the authors noting that the percentage of women working as creators last year was barely higher than it was in the late 90s.